Hafa day, everybody, and welcome back to the show. On July 10th and 11th, there's going to be an accessible parking forum to be held at the Westin Resort. Now, joining me now from the Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities, our Director Ben Servino, and from DISID Evaluation, Enforcement, and Compliance, the very lovely Zenny Natividad. Hafa day to you both. Thank you for joining us.
Hafa day.
Good evening.
Okay,
Thank you for having us.
I want to talk about accessible parking because obviously that's going to be the topic of your forum. But first of all, as I understand it, accessible parking, that's a modification of the term.
That's correct.
And typically we'd say like you have a handicap placard before, but that is no longer
right.
the term to use.
It used to be called handicap parking. It's no longer called or referred to handicap parking, especially after the advent of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, to increase the dignity of people with disabilities. Now they're referring to anything that's man-made as accessible. Accessible parking, accessible ramp, accessible handrail, accessible toilet. So the word accessible is used throughout. So all the parkings now are referred to as accessible parking. If you look at the signage, it doesn't say handicap parking anymore. They've taken that all off.
Okay, excellent. Now, Zenny, I know we're talking about like accessible parking in a broad scope, but are you qualified to talk about like how often on Guam accessible parking is violated by people parking there that shouldn't be parking in there? And whose purview is that?
The enforcement is done by Guam Police Department, so they would have more accurate statistics on that one. However, because of the forum, we have been meeting with the various departments, and we've got recent reports from the GPD that as of January to June, just this year, there's about 112 violations on illegally parked vehicles on accessible parking spaces.
And just so everybody out there in TV land understands the gravity of the situation, if you get caught parking in an accessible parking slot and you do not have the placard, then that's a misdemeanor, correct?
It is.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, so about to the forum now. Who exactly is the target audience, and what kind of, are there breakout sessions, or like are there going to be topics of discussion that will be stressed?
Do you want to explain it, or do you want me to explain it? I'll go ahead and explain the first 2 days. The first day is actually targeted towards people with disabilities and their care providers, maybe a family member, or even organizations that provide transportation for people with disabilities, and also social workers, anybody in the field that's, again, concerned with people with disabilities. Maybe Zenny could highlight the agenda.
Yes. On day one, we are going to talk about the rights and responsibilities of placard holders. What are the violations? Who's eligible? So what we have done is we have actually asked all the various agencies that are responsible for enforcing the various components of the accessible parking laws. Believe it or not, we have about 6 of those public laws. And first, we asked the Department of Revenue and Taxation to talk about eligibility and application for a placard or license plate. And then also, we asked the Guam Police Department to talk about enforcement. And we invited also the traffic court in order to talk about the adjudication if you receive a citation. Of course, overall is by Public Law 31152, DISID came into the picture as the latest player in this. And by the same public law, DISID, our department, was mandated to develop an public education and awareness program so that more people will know about the rights and responsibilities of placard holders as well as businesses. What are the standards for accessible parking that are in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act? Public Law 31152 actually split the accessible parking fund into 50% DISID for the public awareness campaign, as well as monitoring public spaces for accessible parking in places of public accommodation, and the other 50%, of course, with the Guam Police Department for the enforcement part.
All right, excellent. Now, Ben, real quick before we go to commercial break, I know you've got some samples of some placards here. So, and this is a redesign model, as I understand?
Actually, this is what's currently being used. There's like 2 varieties. This is the permanent accessible parking placard that's issued here locally by Rev & Tax. And they're colored blue, and then the temporary placard that you hang on your windshield wiper is a color red. And this is California's placard. It's a little bit more durable. We're going to look at making
plastic
it a little
versus
bit more,
paper, basically.
That's right, because as you can tell, it's been bandaged up, almost like a has its own disability, right? So we want to make it more durable, and hopefully we can get this printed locally and get it out to the public.
Okay, and then real quick, how often do you have to get the placards renewed, or how long are they good for? I guess when Reventax gives them to you.
I'm not exactly sure. I think it's about 3 years, right? Something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
When the placard is no longer usable, you can come and surrender it for a new one.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's going to be the accessible parking form once again at the Westin on the 10th and 11th. All right, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
All right.